Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roche Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. The Louisville Cardinals have fired Kenny Payne to absolutely nobody's surprise. Kenny Payne had the worst two-year stretch of any Louisville basketball coach in history. It was absolutely abysmal. He was breaking records for all the wrong reasons, losing consecutive games, losing to teams that Louisville should never lose to. And we know that at the end of the Rick Pitino era, after he got fired, the NCAA allegations, it made the program go through some tough times. But Louisville did not fail this badly when Chris Mack was the head coach. And even though he ended up getting fired, things got a whole lot worse for Louisville than they ever could have imagined when they hired Kenny Payne. And what makes it so tough is because Kenny Payne was a former Louisville basketball player. I say it all the time with these type of situations. When you got a guy like Patrick Ewing, who is a legend at Georgetown as a basketball player, then he gets fired. Nobody wants to do it. Juwan Howard right now at Michigan is really struggling, and a lot of people are calling for his job, even though it does look like the athletic director of the Michigan Wolverines might be giving him a little bit more time to try to turn it around, even though I don't think that those odds are very likely. Juwan Howard probably should be fired, but we'll see if he can fix it. Mike Woodson's on the hot seat in Indiana, former player there with the Hoosiers. It just hasn't been very successful for programs when they hire a former basketball player to be head coach at their alma mater. It can have success, but it just hasn't been working out recently. But Kenny Payne, every Louisville fan wanted him to be fired, except for this guy. There was one Louisville fan at a game saying a one more year chant for Kenny Payne. Everybody was saying that they do not want Kenny Payne to return, except for that guy saying one more year. I mean, you got to give the guy credit. At least he was going out there and trying to defend Kenny Payne. But outside of that guy, he could have been joking. But if he was being for real, he was the only guy saying that Kenny Payne deserved another season as the Louisville head coach, and he absolutely did not. Because if you look at his record was an abysmal 12-52, and they were 5-35 in the ACC. Chris Mack's record was above 500, and we know what Rick Pitino did at Louisville. His success was off the charts. So these last couple of seasons have been the historical low point for the Louisville Cardinals. They went 4-28 in Kenny Payne's first season and 8-24 this past season. So yeah, they were a little bit better, but Louisville had brought in guys like Scott Clark, Brandon Huntley Hatfield, Trey White. These are pretty talented players. Yes, we know Scott Clark, he had an injury in high school and then he decommitted from Kentucky, went to Illinois, fell out of favor there, and then now ended up at Louisville. So Scott Clark isn't really a guy that you're expecting to turn around a program, but he is a solid player and he had some success this season. But I just felt like Kenny Payne kind of brought in the wrong guys. He brought in some talent, but they were players that were just looking for a spot to play, looking for a spot to get on the floor, and they really weren't guys that were going to help you turn around a program. But I still think if you had a better coach than Kenny Payne, they would have had more success than winning 8 games. Maybe they would have been close to a 500 team because Louisville had too much talent to be that bad. So Kenny Payne definitely deserved to be fired. I hate it for Kenny Payne, but his statements drug him into the ground. I mean, he made that Titanic analogy that was absolutely abysmal. He was constantly throwing his players under the bus, which maybe part of it was the players, but still, Kenny Payne was responsible for bringing those guys in, and Kenny Payne never owned up for his own mistakes. He made terrible in-game adjustments, never had his team playing the right defense, and the offensive scheme was very flawed, and you could tell that he just never got Louisville up for some of these smaller games. The Cardinals almost beat Texas this year. They hung with Indiana, but then they would go out there and get throttled by poor opponents. So that is on Kenny Payne, and with Louisville being the proud program that they are, winning multiple national titles and having so much success in the past with coaches like Rick Pitino and Denny Crum, who was very successful in the 80s, Louisville needs to get a new head coach that can possibly dig them out of the hole that Rick Pitino put them in with the allegations, and then Chris Mack really struggled, and now the historical lows of Kenny Payne. And here are some coaching candidates for the Louisville Cardinals that people are throwing around. Scott Drew is the big home run candidate that every Louisville fan is hoping will possibly happen. And the odds of Scott Drew taking the job are very low. He has built a juggernaut at Baylor. He just won a national title. He's bringing in 5-star talent year in and year out to the Bears. And Baylor has just built a new arena. I really doubt that Scott Drew is going to take the Louisville job. Yes, optically, Louisville is probably a better job than than Baylor because they have more history, just like with Indiana. If Mike Woodson ends up getting fired soon, Indiana's a better job than Baylor optically, but the Baylor Bears are in such great shape right now. It just would not make sense for Scott Drew to leave the best basketball conference in college basketball right now in the Big 12, where he's having so much success. If I'm Scott Drew, I'm not leaving Baylor for the Louisville job. Jerome Tang has been thrown around as another coaching candidate. I could see this one possibly happening. Kansas State is not as good of a job as Louisville. He's kind of struggling right now, but he's already shown success with the Wildcats with what he did in his first season as the head coach. And maybe now that Kansas State could possibly be stagnating a little bit, Jerome Tang could take a better job in the Louisville Cardinals and turn them around, especially with the fact that Louisville is a program that has such great fan support. They've got good NIL, and there's not a lot of teams in the ACC out of Duke and North Carolina that are really all that great. So Louisville could get back to greatness fairly quickly if they can get the right coach. I think Jerome Tang would be a fairly solid candidate. I could see the move, especially with him kind of stagnating a little bit now with the Wildcats. Then you got a guy like Eric Musselman. It's interesting because Musselman's had a lot of success, but he struggled this season with Arkansas because he likes to build through the transfer portal. And some years it works and some years it doesn't. Just like with Kenny Payne, bringing in the guys that he did, it just did not work for the Cardinals. They brought in the wrong players. I do think that Arkansas is a job that is worse than Louisville, but it's not a significantly worse job. I don't think Eric Musselman will move from Arkansas to Louisville, but I could see it. Mick Cronin at UCLA. UCLA is really struggling right now. They're about to be joining the Big Ten, so the Bruins could be going through some tough times right now, but Mick Cronin has a massive buyout at UCLA. He has a huge contract. There's no way that Louisville is going to take that big of a buyout to get Mick Cronin. I don't see it happening. Chris Collins at Northwestern, he's done a fantastic job at a program that just doesn't win. So Chris Collins would be a fairly interesting hire for the Louisville Cardinals. I think that you can't go wrong with this one, but I don't think Chris Collins is a guy that most people would think Louisville would hire, but I don't think it would be a bad option at all, especially with the amount of success Chris Collins has had at a worse program. Lamont Paris, he's a hot name for all the coaching jobs right now because of what he's done at South Carolina. I would not mind this hire for Louisville. He is a guy that doesn't have a lot of high major coaching experience, kind of like Jerome Tang, but with the amount of success he has had at a program like South Carolina, I could see Louisville possibly hiring him, but Lamont Paris could also take the Ohio State job. Dusty May is another guy that could take the Ohio State job, but with the amount of success that Florida Atlantic has had with Dusty May, you got to give a call to Dusty May if you are the Louisville Cardinals. I do think it's more likely he does take the Ohio State job than it is that he takes the Louisville job, but still Dusty May has had a lot of success in a short amount of time as a head coach, but I will say he doesn't have any high major coaching experience, so you're always taking a chance, but I don't really think Louisville could go wrong, especially with the shape they are in right now after the Kenny Payne era. I think Dusty May would definitely turn the program around. And then you have Josh Schertz, the Indiana State head coach. Indiana State has been one of the biggest talked about mid-majors in college basketball this season. This is the most success that the Sycamores have had since the Larry Bird era. Josh Schertz is at a really small school, though, so it would be a huge jump from Indiana State to Louisville, but he knows the area. Louisville and Indiana State are not that far apart, so Josh Schertz could recruit the area. Would not be a bad hire for Louisville, but I do think you got to go with somebody that has more proven experience. Nico Medved from Colorado State and Darian DeVries from Drake are also candidates. I don't really think either of those candidates are super likely, but they are on the list. Would not be terrible hires because they've had a lot of success at smaller schools, but I do think Louisville needs to go with somebody that has had proven success at a bigger school, like a Chris Collins or a Jerome Tang, guys that they can feasibly get. Scott Drew is more than likely not going to happen. A guy like Dusty May, I wouldn't mind for Louisville because of the amount of success he has had, but I would avoid more of the smaller school head coaches because you just don't know if they're going to be able to make the jump to a bigger school and have a lot of success. But regardless, Louisville is a proud basketball program, and they need to turn this ship around soon. They don't need to go down like the Titanic, like Kenny Payne was referring to, but for all Louisville fans, the Kenny Payne era is over. I'm happy for every single Louisville fan out there that they don't have to endure another game head coached by Kenny Payne. I put on Twitter every Louisville fan right now, and you've got SpongeBob going absolutely crazy, screaming, yes, that's exactly what Louisville fans are feeling right now, except the one guy that wanted another year. I don't know why he would want another year for Kenny Payne, but the Kenny Payne era is over, and I think whoever Louisville hires, that coach is going to end up being an upgrade over Kenny Payne. It's tough for Kenny Payne that he was a great former player at Louisville, and now his legacy as a Louisville Cardinal is going to be tainted with these 2 terrible seasons at head coach. I don't think he was trying to sabotage Louisville, but he did not do a good job at head coach, and now Louisville needs to make the right hire so they can get back to being a very solid program in college basketball. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about Kenny Payne getting fired as the Louisville head coach, and whether you are like most Louisville fans that you are glad that he was fired, or whether you're like that one guy and you think that Kenny Payne deserved another season at head coach, which I don't really see how you could, and who you would like to be Louisville's next head basketball coach. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I'll see you next time.